The desert wind carried grit that stung eyes and burned lungs, yet the soldiers crouched low in the blasted-out husk of a school didn't blink. Every sound outside, the snap of a loose shutter, the distant thump of mortar fire, felt like it could be the last thing they heard. Then the silence broke. A convoy appeared on the ridge, enemy trucks bristling with mounted guns, their engines echoing across the valley floor. The platoon had been told reinforcements were still 2 hours out. They had minutes, maybe less, before those vehicles closed in. Specialist Danielle Harper pressed her cheek to the crumbling concrete, heart hammering against her ribs. The captain's voice rasped over the radio, low and hard. "We're boxed in. They'll have height advantage if they hit from the ridge. Any chance we've got eyes that can reach that far?" The silence that followed was heavy. The squad's designated marksman had gone down the day before, shrapnel tearing through his side. No one had stepped up to replace him, not until the captain's eyes swept over to her. Harper knew what he was thinking before he even opened his mouth. She'd qualified with long rifles and training, sure, but no one here thought of her as the one who'd pull off a ridgeline shot under fire. "Specialist," the captain said, voice flat. "Take the M24. That's an order." For a heartbeat, her hands felt heavy as stone. The weapon was laid out in front of her, scavenged from their injured comrade's kit. She swallowed hard, fingers tracing the cold steel. She could say no, tell him she wasn't ready, but she saw the eyes around her. Men and women who had sweated, bled, and nearly died beside her in weeks of firefights. If she faltered now, they'd be caught like fish in a barrel. She nodded once. "Roger." The world seemed to shrink to the rifle's weight in her grip. Harper crawled to a half-broken window, glass crunching under her elbow as she braced the rifle against the sill. Through the scope, the desert stretched out, heat shimmered, dust, and then the sharp outlines of trucks cresting the ridge. Her breath caught. She steadied her hands. Beside her, Sergeant Hayes muttered, "Christ, they're not slowing down." "Quiet," she whispered, more to herself than him. The scope swam for a moment, her pulse hammering in her ears, then the reticle steadied. She exhaled long and slow. The lead truck carried a gunner, a hulking figure with a heavy machine gun mounted at his waist. If he set up in range, their position would be chewed apart in seconds. Harper adjusted a fraction of an inch, her finger tightening against the trigger. The shot cracked. The echo rolled through the valley like thunder. Through the scope she saw the gunner pitch backward, his weapon spraying harmless rounds into the sky. The platoon held its breath. Then another voice rose, a panicked shout from the convoy. Truck slowed. Confusion rippled through their ranks. "Holy hell," Hayes muttered, staring at her. "You dropped him." Her mouth was dry. She pulled the bolt, chambering another round. She didn't let herself celebrate. Next target. The convoy split, one truck veering wide. Through the glass she found the driver. Another shot. The windshield spiderwebbed, the truck swerving wildly before slamming into a rock outcropping. Flames licked upward. The platoon erupted in shouts, part disbelief, part adrenaline. Even the captain, usually stone-faced, let out a sharp laugh that cut through the tension. "Keep it up, Harper. Make them think twice about climbing that hill." But as she lined up her third shot, Harper realized the enemy wasn't retreating. They were regrouping. Smoke began to pop in controlled bursts, masking their advance. The survivors weren't panicking, they were maneuvering. "Sir, they're not backing off," she said tightly, never pulling her eye from the scope. "They're using cover. I can't tag them if I can't see." The captain's voice was grim. "Then we brace. You bought us minutes, Specialist. Don't waste them." Minutes. That was all. She dragged in air through her teeth, shifting her rifle to track shadows in the smoke. Every choice mattered now. If she picked wrong, if she hit nothing, her squad would be swallowed whole. She tried to push back the tremor in her hands, forcing herself to focus on the rhythm of movement. One silhouette rose too high above the smoke, the shape of a shoulder angled to fire. She squeezed. The figure folded. "Got him," Hayes breathed. But even as Harper cycled another round, gunfire raked their position. Bullets shattered concrete overhead, showering her with grit. She ducked, teeth clenched. "Suppressive fire now," the captain barked. The platoon roared back, rifles chattering as they poured rounds into the haze. The firefight thundered on. Harper fought to find her rhythm. Inhale, exhale, fire. Each shot was a decision, a gamble with no time to second-guess. Twice she missed, bullets sparking off metal frames. Each miss made her stomach twist, the weight of her squad pressing down. Then came the moment that shifted everything. She spotted the enemy commander. He was leaning out of a truck, shouting orders with wild gestures, trying to rally his men. He wasn't in her sights for more than a second, but it was enough. Her fingers squeezed. The round punched through his chest, snapping him backward into the dirt. The effect rippled instantly. The fighters broke, scrambling for cover without direction. Trucks wheeled in chaos. A hush fell, broken only by the ring in her ears. Then slowly soldiers around her turned. Their eyes were wide, faces streaked with dust and disbelief. Even the captain, crouched near the doorway, stared. "Specialist Harper," he said slowly, almost like he didn't recognize her. That was command-level precision. Hayes barked a laugh, shaking his head. "Sir, I think we just found ourselves a new sniper." Harper forced herself to look away from the smoking ridge. Her hands still trembled around the rifle, her breath uneven. She wanted to believe it was over, that she'd done enough, but her gut twisted. No firefight ended clean. Not out here. And she was right. From the far ridge, a distant boom cracked the air. The ground near their building erupted, the shockwave blasting through broken walls. An enemy mortar team, hidden, waiting for the distraction. "Take cover," the captain roared. Harper dove, dragging the M24 tight to her chest as concrete and dust rained down. Her ears rang, lungs burning. Around her, soldiers scrambled for shelter, shouts blending with the thunder of another incoming round. This wasn't finished. She'd pulled them back from the edge once. But now she realized her choices were just beginning. Every trigger pull meant life or death, not just for her but for everyone who looked to her now with a strange new trust. And she wasn't sure if she could carry it. The captain grabbed her arm, hauling her upright amid the chaos. His eyes were fierce, unwavering. "Specialist Harper, listen to me. You just shifted the battlefield. You hold that rifle, you carry the responsibility that comes with it. We're alive because of you. Don't let that shake you. Own it." She swallowed hard, nodding, though the words stuck in her throat. Outside, another explosion shook the walls, closer this time. The platoon braced. Through the haze of fear and adrenaline, one thought cut sharper than all the rest. She hadn't chosen this role, it had been shoved into her hands. But if she didn't rise to it, none of them would make it out. Her decision was made. Harper pulled the rifle back into position, crawling to another window where she could sight the mortar team through the storm of dust and smoke. Her squad poured suppressing fire, trying to keep enemy heads down. The rifle's weight no longer felt foreign. It felt necessary. Her breath steadied. The scope caught movement, 3 figures working furiously to reload the mortar. She centered the reticle, squeezed. One dropped. Adjusted, squeezed again. Another crumpled. The third ran. She tracked him, finger tightening, but something stopped her. He wasn't carrying a weapon, just scrambling into the dunes, disappearing into the desert. For a split second, her finger hovered. "Why'd you stop?" Hayes barked, firing from the doorway. She didn't answer. She lowered the rifle just enough. Maybe mercy had no place out here. Maybe it was a mistake. But she knew what it felt like to be handed an impossible role, to want nothing more than to escape it. For reasons she couldn't name, she let him run. When she turned back, the captain's eyes were on her. He didn't ask. He just gave a short nod as if to say he'd seen and that it mattered. The next hours blurred into survival, exchanges of gunfire, bursts of silence, the grinding tension of waiting for the next push. Reinforcements finally arrived, armored vehicles cresting the opposite ridge. The enemy broke for good then, scattering into the desert as artillery pounded their retreat. When the dust settled, the platoon emerged from the wreckage of the schoolhouse. Exhaustion weighed heavy on every face, but beneath it ran something else, an energy, a thread of awe, all of it aimed at her. General Rollins arrived with the reinforcements, his uniform spotless despite the battlefield around him. He strode across the rubble, eyes scanning the damage until they landed on Harper. The captain stepped forward, saluting. "Sir, Specialist Harper was instrumental in holding this position. She picked up the M24 when our marksman went down. Her shots turned the tide." Rollins studied her, silence stretching. She felt exposed under his gaze, like he could see every tremor still hidden in her hands. Finally he spoke, voice carrying like a hammer. "Specialist," he said, "you were handed a rifle today. And you made decisions that saved lives. Not every soldier could. Not every soldier would." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Rollins's expression shifted, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "I'll be watching your career very closely." And then he walked past, leaving her standing in the dust, the weight of his words heavier than the rifle in her arms. Harper glanced at her squad. Some grinned, some clapped her on the shoulder, Hayes muttering something about buying her the first round if they ever saw civilization again. But she barely heard them. Because she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The convoy wrecks still burned on the ridge, black smoke clawing toward the sky like fingers that refused to let go. The battlefield was quieter now, but not silent. Every soldier in the platoon knew silence here never lasted. Somewhere beyond the dunes, men regrouped, planned, and swore vengeance. Specialist Danielle Harper sat on a broken chunk of wall, her helmet resting beside her boots. The M24 lay across her lap, and though her hands no longer shook, the weapon felt heavier than it had during the fight. She'd made every shot count, or almost every shot. She could still see the face of the third mortar operator she'd let slip away, could still feel the strange twist in her chest as he vanished into the desert. Hayes had said nothing about it since, but the thought lingered like sand between teeth. The captain crouched nearby, speaking in low tones with General Rawlins. Their words didn't carry, but the general's posture, erect, hands clasped behind his back, made it clear he wasn't here just to commend. He was here to decide. Soldiers like Harper didn't get noticed unless higher command wanted something. And when generals wanted something, it was rarely simple. Specialist Harper, Rawlins called suddenly, his voice cutting across the ruined courtyard. She stiffened, almost dropping the rifle from her lap. "Sir." He motioned her forward. She rose, boots crunching through rubble, and approached. His eyes, sharp and assessing, scanned her like she was a piece of equipment being inspected for flaws. "You kept this platoon alive," he said evenly. "That much I've heard firsthand. But I don't reward lucky shots. Tell me, why did you take the rifle when ordered? You could have deferred. You could have claimed you weren't ready." Her throat tightened. She swallowed. "Sir, I didn't think I had the choice. Not if it meant the others would," she hesitated, searching for the words. "Would die." Rawlins studied her in silence, then gave a slow nod. "So you act under pressure because you value lives over fear. Good." He glanced at the captain. "She's not staying in this platoon." The captain stiffened. "Sir, with respect, she's integral to—" "That's final," Rawlins interrupted, voice like iron. "We've got an operation that requires precision. She's coming with me. Prep her gear." Harper's chest hollowed. "Just like that? Yanked out, reassigned without even a word in her defense?" She looked at the captain, hoping he'd fight harder, but his eyes only flickered with resignation. Orders were orders. 2 hours later, Harper was jammed into the back of a transport, the M24 strapped across her chest, her squad fading behind her in a haze of dust. Hayes had clapped her shoulder before she left, muttering, "Don't let the brass eat you alive." That had been the only goodbye. The transport rattled across the desert, suspension groaning. Beside her sat 3 soldiers she didn't know, faces painted with exhaustion and weariness. None spoke. Rawlins rode up front, speaking into a secure headset, his words muffled but urgent. Night fell by the time they reached the forward operations base. Floodlights cut across the perimeter, illuminating walls of HESCO barriers and razor wire. The base was alive with motion. Mechanics working on armored vehicles, medics rushing stretchers, radio chatter spilling from tents. Harper was ushered straight into a briefing tent where maps sprawled across tables and commanders leaned over them with drawn faces. Rawlins gestured her closer. "Specialist Harper, this is Task Force Iron Hand. You've been pulled in because your skill set is now mission critical." "Skill set?" She almost laughed. She hadn't even known she had one until a few hours ago. One of the commanders, a lieutenant colonel with lines of fatigue etched deep in his face, tapped the map. "Enemy stronghold here. Mountain Pass. They've got supplies funneled through a series of bunkers. Intel says a high-value target's operating there, callsign Vulture. He's responsible for coordinating mortar and artillery strikes across this whole sector. We cut him off, we break their coordination. But the pass is narrow, heavily defended. We need eyes and precision fire to clear a path." Rawlins turned to Harper. "That's where you come in." Her pulse jumped. "Sir, with respect. I've never operated outside my platoon. I don't even—" "You can and you will," Rawlins said sharply. "What you did today wasn't chance. You have instincts. And instincts win wars." The lieutenant colonel slid a folder toward her. Inside were grainy satellite photos, cliffs, bunkers dug into stone, men moving crates under camouflage nets. Harper's mouth went dry. "When do we leave?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Dawn," Rawlins said. There was no room for refusal. That night she lay on a cot in a crowded tent, unable to sleep. The base hummed with generators, the distant rumble of artillery rolling like thunder. Around her, soldiers snored or muttered in restless dreams. Harper stared at the ceiling, fingers curled tight around the M24 resting by her side. She replayed the captain's words in her head. "You hold that rifle, you carry the responsibility that comes with it." By dawn, she was strapped into a helicopter with 6 others, rotors thundering overhead. The sun bled over the horizon, painting the desert in hues of fire. Harper sat across from Sergeant Ruiz, the team leader for this mission. His eyes were sharp, calculating, his jaw set like granite. "You're the sharpshooter," he said over the roar. "I don't care what you were yesterday. Today you're the reason we're not all body bags by nightfall. Clear?" "Clear," Harper said, though her stomach twisted. The helicopter banked hard, dipping low through the canyon before setting down on a flat outcrop. The team spilled out, weapons raised, moving quick into cover. Harper followed, heart hammering, the weight of the rifle grounding her. The climb through the pass was brutal, steep switchbacks, loose rocks sliding underfoot, every shadow a possible ambush. Distant gunfire echoed occasionally, each report a reminder that the enemy wasn't far. Halfway up, Ruiz signaled a halt. He pointed toward a ridge overlooking the approach. "Harper. Eyes there." She crawled forward, belly scraping stone, and settled the rifle against a flat rock. Through the scope she scanned the ridge, and froze. 2 enemy sentries stood watch, rifles slung, their silhouettes sharp against the sky. 2 targets, she whispered into comms. "Take them," Ruiz ordered. Her breath steadied. "Inhale. Exhale. Squeeze." The first dropped, crumpling soundlessly. She shifted, lined up the second, fired. Cling. "Ridge clear," she said, pulling back. Ruiz gave a curt nod. "Good. Move." They advanced, using her cover fire to navigate choke points. Every time they neared an exposed stretch, Harper picked off threats before they could react. She felt herself slipping into rhythm again, scope, breath, squeeze, chamber. Each shot built trust, the team glancing her way not with doubt but with reliance. But then came the turn. As they neared the bunkers, the mountain erupted with gunfire. Dozens of rifles blazed from dug-in positions, tracer rounds streaking across the canyon. The team dove for cover as bullets tore the air. "Pin down those emplacements," Ruiz shouted. Harper crawled to a vantage point, scope snapping to the source. Machine guns hammered from sandbag nests carved into the stone. She fired, dropping one gunner then another, but there were too many. Her teammates returned fire, but the crossfire pinned them tight. Then she spotted him, a tall figure moving among the bunkers, pointing, shouting. Even through the chaos, she recognized the authority in his stance. "Vulture." Her finger hovered. One shot could end this. But he was flanked by 2 bodyguards, both scanning, rifles ready. She had one chance, maybe 2. If she missed, he'd vanish into the mountain and the mission would crumble. She exhaled. Centered the reticle. "Target acquired," she whispered. "Take it," Ruiz barked. Her finger tightened. A blast shook the ground, a rocket striking the cliff near their cover. The shockwave slammed into her, scope jerking wide. Her shot cracked off, sparking uselessly against stone. "Shit," she gasped, fumbling to realign. But Vulture was gone, pulled into the bunker by his guards. Gunfire roared louder. Ruiz cursed, dragging a wounded soldier behind cover. "Harper. We needed that shot." Her chest clenched. She'd failed. But there was no time for regret. She sighted again, cutting down advancing fighters to buy breathing room. Sweat stung her eyes, her breath ragged. Every shot now was defense, not precision, keeping her team alive as they crawled toward a side crevice for shelter. By the time they regrouped inside the narrow gap, 2 men were down, one badly bleeding. Ruiz slammed a fist against the rock wall. "Damn it. He's in the bunker now. We'll never get a clean shot." Harper leaned back against stone, heart pounding, guilt gnawing at her gut. She'd had him. 1 second, one trigger pull, and she'd lost it. Ruiz crouched in front of her, eyes hard. "Listen to me. You don't get to fold. You missed, fine. It happens. But now we adjust. We're not dead yet." She met his gaze, the weight of responsibility pressing like lead. For the first time since she picked up the rifle, she wanted to drop it, to shove it away and let someone else carry it. But no one else could. Her radio crackled suddenly, Rollins's voice, sharp and urgent. "Iron Hand status?" Ruiz grabbed the mic. "We've got contact. 2 down." Vulture retreated into the bunker. "We're pinned." Static, then Rollins again. "Hold position. Reinforcements are en route." "Harper." The line crackled. "Specialist Harper. You get another chance." Don't waste it. Her grip tightened around the rifle. Another chance. But chances in war were never guaranteed. Outside, gunfire built again, echoing off the canyon walls. The enemy wasn't retreating. They were coming to finish the job. Harper pulled the bolt, chambering another round. She wiped dust from her scope and pressed her cheek against the stock. The fight wasn't over, not until she made sure of it. And this time she promised herself she wouldn't miss. The canyon walls funneled the sound of gunfire into a deafening roar. Bullets clanged against stone, ricocheting sparks into the shadows where Harper and her team crouched. Dust rained down in thin streams, each impact hammering home the truth. They were cornered, and the enemy knew it. Harper's cheek pressed into the dirt, her scope angled at the narrow approach. Shapes darted through the haze, fighters closing in, moving with ruthless confidence. She drew a bead on the lead man, his AK raised and squeezed. He dropped. Another surged forward, only to fall with her next shot. Her rhythm steadied, but the press of bodies didn't stop. For every one she cut down, two more seemed to emerge from the bunker's shadow. Harper, how many? Ruiz barked over the fire. Too many, she snapped, chambering another round. They're probing, testing how close they can get. Then we make him pay for every step, Ruiz growled. The wounded soldier groaned behind them, clutching his side where blood soaked his uniform. Another man pressed bandages into the wound, but it was a losing fight. Harper tried not to glance back. If she let herself dwell on it, her aim would falter. And faltering meant death. The canyon shook again as another rocket slammed into the opposite wall, showering them in debris. Harper ducked, heart slamming, then popped her scope back up. The blast had forced one of the machine gun crews into the open. She tracked, fired, dropped him before he could swing the weapon their way. That's buying us seconds, not minutes, Ruiz warned. Harper's jaw clenched. Seconds were all she had to give. A sudden burst of static cracked through her radio. Rollins's voice broke through, harsh and strained. Iron Hand, reinforcements ETA 10 minutes. Hold your ground. Harper, repeat, hold your ground. 10 minutes. 10 years in battlefield time. Copy, Ruiz snapped. He leaned close to Harper, eyes fierce. We're not gonna make 10 unless you cut deeper. Find their command node. If Vulture's in there, you finish him. You get me? Her stomach twisted. She'd already failed once. The image of him slipping into that bunker replayed in her mind like a cruel loop. But Ruiz's eyes bored into her, demanding an answer. Copy, she said, voice rough. Then move. She crawled along the narrow crevice, rifle cradled close, searching for higher ground. Her palms slipped on grit, knees grinding into stone, but she forced herself upward until she reached a jutting ledge that overlooked the bunker complex. From here she could see deeper, smoke-streaked entrances, fighters darting between positions, the glow of lamps illuminating tunnels beyond. She scanned quickly, pulse thundering. Then she saw him. Vulture. He stood near the mouth of the central bunker, his frame tall and commanding even at this distance. His guards flanked him, weapons ready. He barked orders to runners, his arms slicing the air. Even without sound, Harper could feel the authority radiating from him, pulling the chaos into order. Her finger rested on the trigger. She steadied her breathing. This was it. This was the moment. Target sighted, she whispered into comms. Take it, Ruiz urged. Her scope tightened. Reticle centered on his chest. Inhale. Exhale. And then, movement. A boy, maybe 13, scrambled out of the bunker, hauling a crate half his size. Vulture shoved him aside, barking something. The boy stumbled right into Harper's line of fire. Her chest clenched. Her finger froze. If she pulled, she'd cut down more than her target. Harp, take the shot. Ruiz barked. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The boy's wide eyes filled her scope. Then Vulture moved, vanishing into the bunker's shadow again. The chance was gone. God damn it. Ruiz shouted. You had him. I couldn't, she gasped. You wouldn't. Her hands shook. She pulled away from the scope, forcing air into her lungs. Around her the fight raged on, bullets slicing through stone. Ruiz's words cut deeper than any shrapnel. A scream tore from behind. The wounded soldier, his breathing stopped, chest gone still. His buddy slammed a fist into the ground, rage twisting his face. Harper looked back down her scope, fury surging. If she couldn't kill Vulture, she'd cut down everything around him. She snapped onto one of his guards, dropped him clean. Then the other. Then the runner carrying orders. Each fell, each shot a release of the tension ripping through her chest. But Vulture had vanished again. A new voice cracked over comms, unfamiliar, urgent. This is Hammer 2-1 inbound, providing close air support. Mark your target. Relief surged through Harper's chest. Air cover. Finally. Ruiz grabbed the smoke, yanked the pin, and hurled it toward the bunker complex. Purple plumes rose, curling through the gunfire. The sky split as an A-10 thundered overhead, its Gu-8 cannon roaring like a beast. Explosions tore through the ridgeline, bunkers shattering under the storm of rounds. Harper ducked, heat and shockwaves pounding her as debris rained down the canyon. When the dust cleared, half the enemy position lay in ruin. Fires licked from shattered bunkers, fighters scattering in every direction. Harper scrambled back onto her scope. And froze. Through the smoke, Vulture stumbled into view. Blood streaked his face, dust coating his uniform, but he was alive. He staggered, then steadied, barking hoarse commands to what fighters remained. Her scope locked. Her breath steadied. This time nothing stood in her way. She squeezed. The shot cracked. The round tore through him, snapping him backward. He collapsed in the dirt, unmoving. "Target down," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Ruiz's laugh was ragged, half-mad relief. "That's how it's done." But even as victory surged, new fire erupted from the ridge above. Sniper rounds cracked against the stone inches from Harper's head. She rolled, dragging the rifle with her, heart slamming. "They've got counter-snipers," she shouted. "Stay low." Ruiz barked. Bullets sparked off stone as enemy marksmen zeroed in on her ledge. She crawled desperately, finding no safe angle. Each shot pinned her tighter, the air alive with the whine of rounds. "Harper, you've gotta move," Ruiz shouted. She risked a glance through the scope. Up on the ridge, she spotted them. Two snipers, prone behind rocks, scopes glinting in the firelight. They had her boxed. Her pulse steadied. She didn't think. She just acted. She snapped onto the first, squeezed. The rifle bucked, the figure dropped. The second fired, his round shattering stone inches from her skull. She rolled, chambered again, swung her scope wide. The reticle found his chest. Squeeze. The second sniper crumpled. Silence returned, sharp and sudden. Harper lay there, chest heaving, sweat dripping into her eyes. Her whole body trembled, not from fear but from the sheer intensity of the moment. She'd faced him down. She'd taken her shot. "Snipers down," she said hoarsely. Cheers erupted over comms. The remaining fighters scattered, their will broken. The canyon quieted, punctuated only by the crackle of fire and the distant thrum of retreating engines. By the time reinforcements arrived, the mountain was theirs. Back at base, the debrief was chaos. Reports shouted, wounded carried, intel passed like contraband. Harper sat on a crate outside, the M24 across her knees, staring at the dust swirling under the floodlights. Her hands were steady now. Too steady. Rollins found her there. His uniform was crisp as ever, though his eyes burned with intensity. "You killed him," he said, no question in his tone. "Yes, sir." "You hesitated first." Her throat tightened. "There was a civilian. A kid." "He was." Rollins raised a hand, silencing her. "You're not judged for the shot you didn't take. Only the ones you do. Remember that." His words cut deep. Was that a warning? A lesson? Or just a dismissal of the weight that pressed on her chest? She couldn't tell. He leaned closer, voice low. "You've proven you can change the tide of a battlefield. But understand this, Harper. Every decision you make from here will ripple far beyond your trigger. And not all of them will be clean." She met his gaze, trying to find certainty, but saw only her own reflection in his eyes, dust-streaked, exhausted, and forever changed. Rollins straightened, nodding once. "Rest. You'll need it. This war isn't over. Not by a long shot." He walked away, leaving her with the silence. Harper looked down at the rifle in her hands. The metal gleamed faintly under the lights, heavy, unyielding. She had killed Vulture. She had saved her team. But the boy's eyes still lingered in her memory, burned deeper than any shot she'd ever taken. And she knew, with cold certainty, that the next mission would demand even more. The desert wind howled through the camp, carrying with it the promise of another battle. And Specialist Danielle Harper sat ready, the weight of her choices etched into her bones. The sun had barely started to climb over the jagged ridges when the outpost's silence was torn apart by the low thud of distant explosions. Dust trembled loose from the tent poles above Emma as she jolted awake, hand instinctively snapping toward the rifle. Propped against her cot. Her chest heaved, not from the shock of the sound, but from the pounding realization that this wasn't another nightmare. This was real. She pushed through the flap, boots crunching against gravel. Soldiers were already rushing across the compound, their faces taut with urgency. A plume of smoke drifted upward far beyond the perimeter, thick and black against the pale horizon. "Mortars," Corporal Vasquez shouted, waving her over. His helmet was crooked on his head, his eyes darting skyward like he expected fire to fall at any second. "They're probing, not accurate yet, but it means contact's coming." Emma scanned the eastern ridge, the same stretch she'd been staring at through her scope just the day before. Now her pulse surged with the knowledge that someone out there was watching them back, gauging their defenses, setting the tempo. "Where's Captain Torres?" she asked. "Command post. He wants eyes up top," Vasquez replied. Emma tightened her grip on the M24 slung across her shoulder. She didn't wait for further explanation. Her boots carried her toward the half-ruined observation tower at the edge of the compound. The ladder rattled beneath her as she climbed, every creak echoing like a warning in her ears. When she reached the top, the wind hit her face sharp and cool. She set the rifle on the sandbags, adjusted the bipod, and peered through the scope. The world snapped into clarity, scraggly brush, jagged rocks, the faint shimmer of heat already rising off the ground. For minutes there was nothing. Then movement. A figure darting between boulders. Another crouched low with a tube on his shoulder. "RPG," Emma hissed into the radio. Seconds later, a hiss and a streak of smoke cut the air. The rocket slammed into the outer wall, shaking the ground beneath her. Alarms blared. The base erupted into motion. Emma exhaled, steadied her scope, and squeezed the trigger. The man with the launcher folded, tumbling backward. She worked the bolt without thought, the world narrowing to the tiny circle of her scope. Another fighter appeared, waving his arms, shouting to unseen comrades. Emma fired again. Dust kicked from the rock beside him, a near miss. He ducked away. Gunfire cracked across the valley. Emma's teammates opened up with .50 calories from the guard towers, tracers carving lines of fire through the dawn. The air stank of gunpowder and smoke. "Keep your eyes east," Torres barked over the net. "They're testing our line." Emma knew this wasn't the main assault. This was the warm-up, the shove before the shove turned into a battering ram. For nearly an hour the attack pulsed and faded. Mortars thumped from the ridges, RPGs hissed, rifles cracked, but it was all harassment. Then silence. Thick, heavy silence. Emma wiped sweat from her brow, scanning the ridges for any clue of what came next. She hated silence more than the roar of battle. Silence meant planning. Silence meant they weren't done. When she finally climbed down, her legs ached with tension. Torres was hunched over a table inside the command tent, maps spread, radio squawking with chatter from HQ. His jaw was locked tight, his eyes flicking between the map and his lieutenants. "They're trying to draw us out," Torres muttered. "Classic tactic. Hit, pull back, wait for us to chase." Emma cleared her throat. "Sir, I saw at least a dozen fighters on that ridge. But they were sloppy, exposed. I think they wanted us to count them. Make us think that's all there is." Torres looked up at her. For a moment, the weight of command carved deeper lines into his face. "And your gut?" Emma swallowed. "They're waiting for nightfall. That's when they'll come. And it won't just be a dozen." Torres studied her, then gave a small nod. "Post your team on the north sector. You'll be my eyes. If they're coming, I want to know before they're on top of us." Emma saluted and turned to leave, but Torres called after her. "Reynolds, one shot saved a whole tower this morning. Don't think that went unnoticed." The words hit her harder than any round she'd ever taken. She gave a stiff nod and walked out before emotion cracked her mask. By dusk, the tension was a living thing in the air. Soldiers checked and rechecked their weapons. Conversations were clipped, movements sharp. The desert wind carried the faint smell of burning rubber, wreckage still smoldering where mortars had struck hours earlier. Emma sat up on the northern wall with her rifle, her spotter Private Langley beside her. He was young, fresh-faced, still had that green nervousness about him. But his eyes were sharp. "You think they'll hit us hard tonight?" he asked quietly. Emma adjusted her scope, scanning the darkening ridges. "Count on it. That means we don't flinch. We don't break. You stay on my calls and you'll live to see sunrise." Langley nodded, swallowing hard. The first flash came after midnight. A brief, sharp tongue of flame from the ridge. Mortars again. The first round slammed into the southern perimeter, followed by a hail of gunfire. "Contact south," voices screamed over the net. Emma kept her scope north. Her instinct screamed. This was the feint. And then, shadows, dozens of them pouring from the rocks. Figures hunched low, rifles glinting in the moonlight. They were coming fast, too fast. North wall, mass movement. Emma yelled into her radio. Repeat, mass movement. Langley opened fire with his M4, bursts of light flickering against the wall. Emma picked her targets one by one, firing smooth and steady. Fighters dropped in the dust, but more surged forward, shouting war cries that rose above the roar of battle. Machine guns on the wall thundered to life. The night lit with muzzle flashes, tracers streaking like comets. Explosions tore chunks from the ground as grenades went off. One fighter reached the wall with a ladder, slamming it against the stone. Emma dropped him with a shot through the chest, but another replaced him. Then another. "Get those ladders down," someone screamed. Langley's rifle clicked dry. His hands fumbled for a new mag, shaking. Emma grabbed his shoulder. "Breathe. Reload. Then back on target." He nodded, forcing calm, slamming the magazine home. A blast rocked the wall, throwing them both flat. Dust rained down, ears ringing. When Emma pushed herself up, she saw a breach, concrete blown apart, fighters pouring through. "Breach north wall," she roared into the net. She grabbed Langley by the vest. "We move." Together they scrambled down the ladder, boots hitting dirt as chaos swallowed the base. Fighters flooded through the gap, rifles spitting fire. American soldiers rushed to meet them, shouting, firing, the clash brutal and immediate. Emma raised her rifle, fired point blank into a fighter charging with a blade. He crumpled, momentum carrying him to her feet. Langley fired beside her, face pale but steady now. Torres's voice cut through the comms. "Hold the breach. Do not let them through." Emma knew this was the fulcrum. If they broke here, the whole base would fall. She planted herself in the gap, firing, reloading, firing again. Every decision was survival. Every second bought them another breath. Langley shouted something, pointed, but Emma was already moving, already firing at a fighter raising an RPG in the breach. The round took him in the head, dropping him before he could fire. The battle stretched into eternity. Minutes bled into hours. By the time the last echoes of gunfire faded, the base was littered with bodies, enemy and friend alike. Smoke drifted in the moonlight. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Emma sank against the wall, chest heaving, her rifle slick with sweat and dust. Langley sat beside her, wide-eyed, shaking but alive. Torres walked up, helmet gone, blood on his sleeve. He looked at Emma for a long moment, then said, "You held the line. Without you, this base would have been ash." Emma didn't feel like a hero. She felt hollow, her ears still ringing with the screams of men she hadn't been fast enough to save. As dawn crept over the desert, the survivors gathered in the yard. The cost was written on every face. Emma stood among them, silent, eyes on the horizon. She knew this wasn't over. Last night was only the beginning. And somewhere beyond those ridges, the enemy was regrouping, waiting, watching. Her hands tightened on the rifle. She had made her choice. And she would face the consequences. The morning after the attack was cruel. The desert sun rose with indifferent brilliance, spilling gold light over a base still choked in smoke and the stench of burned powder. The ground was a mosaic of churned dirt, blackened rubble, and the still bodies of men who had fought until their last breath. Emma stood over the breach in the northern wall, staring at the jagged concrete, the blood-dark stains soaking the sand. She could hear the scrape of shovels nearby as soldiers dug shallow graves, their motions mechanical, faces locked in expressions of exhaustion and grief. Captain Torres approached, his arm in a sling, his features sharper than ever with fatigue. He stopped beside her and studied the horizon. "They didn't hit us just to hurt us. They wanted to see if they could break us. They didn't, but they'll be back." Emma didn't respond at first. Her throat was tight, her body aching. She had killed more men in one night than she'd ever imagined possible when she'd enlisted. And still too many of their own had fallen. Torres broke the silence. "HQ wants answers. They want to know where the hell these fighters keep coming from. Supply lines don't just appear in the middle of the desert. Someone's feeding them." Emma's eyes shifted from the horizon to him. "You're saying we're going out there?" "I'm saying recon isn't enough anymore. They hit us with numbers we shouldn't have seen this far out. That means there's a nest, an operation, a hub. And we're going to cut it out." Emma exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The idea of stepping outside the wire after last night's bloodbath felt like walking willingly into a fire. But she also knew it was the only way. The enemy wasn't going to stop. By midday the mission was set. A strike team, lean and fast, would move into the valleys north of the ridges. Emma was assigned to overwatch and precision support, Langley still her spotter. Vasquez, hardened and restless, would lead the assault element with a dozen men. As the team prepped gear, Langley approached Emma, his hands busy checking the tripod for their spotting scope. "Reynolds," he said, voice quieter than usual. "Last night you told me to breathe. Reload. I would have frozen if you hadn't said that." Emma tightened the strap on her pack. "You didn't freeze. You listened. That's the difference." He nodded, swallowing. Then more firmly, "I'll listen again today." She gave him the faintest smile. It was enough to steady him. They rolled out in two armored MRAPs, engines growling, dust plumes curling behind them. The desert stretched endless, unforgiving. Every rock, every shadow felt like it could hide a rifle. Emma sat with the butt of her rifle against her boot, eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon. She thought of home, of her father teaching her how to hold a hunting rifle in the backwoods of Kentucky, of how he'd said, "The deer isn't your enemy, Emma. Respect the shot. Respect what it means to take a life." She wondered if he'd still recognize the woman she'd become. The convoy slowed as they reached a narrow pass. The MRAPs halted, engines rumbling. Torres's voice crackled over the radio. "This is as far as vehicles go. We move on foot from here." They dismounted into silence so thick it pressed on their skin. The cliffs rose high on either side, jagged and red in the fading light. It was the perfect place for an ambush. Emma and Langley scrambled up a rocky slope to set up overwatch while the others advanced below. She laid prone, adjusted her scope, and swept the ridges. Nothing. Just wind, dust, and empty stone. For 30 minutes they crept deeper. Then Langley whispered, "Movement. 11 o'clock. 200 meters." Emma focused her scope. Shadows against the rock, too deliberate to be natural. She counted 6 figures, armed, watching the trail below. "Contact North Ridge." 6 fighters, she relayed. Torres's voice came back, "Take the shot." Emma lined up the first target, a man crouched with binoculars. She slowed her breathing, squeezed the trigger. The round hit, dropping him. The others scattered, but too late. Emma and Langley worked in deadly rhythm, spotting, firing, adjusting. Within seconds, 4 more were down. The last melted into the rocks, gone. The valley answered with gunfire. Bullets cracked and sparked against stone. Vasquez's men dropped to cover, returning fire. Emma scanned for muzzle flashes, picking them off one by one. The firefight rippled across the canyon, echoing like thunder. Dust clouds rose, obscuring vision. Grenades boomed, sending shockwaves bouncing between the cliffs. Langley shouted, "Left ridge, RPG." Emma swiveled, spotted the fighter raising the launcher, and fired. The shot took him mid-chest. The launcher clattered from his hands and went off against the rock, a fireball lighting the cliff. "Good kill," Langley muttered, voice tight. For nearly 20 minutes they traded fire, until the last resistance broke and scattered into the labyrinth of stone. Silence returned, jagged and uneasy. Torres's voice came again. "Push forward. We're close." They moved deeper, through twisting paths and narrow cuts in the rock, until the air shifted. The faint tang of smoke. The smell of cooking fires. Emma's stomach turned cold. She knew what that meant. They crested a ridge and froze. Below lay a hidden encampment tucked into the canyon floor. Dozens of tents. Crates of ammunition. Vehicles half covered with netting. And men, scores of them, moving between fires, armed and unguarded, unaware their secrecy had been broken. Langley whispered, "Jesus. It's a whole city." Torres's voice was low but sharp. "We hit this, we cut their throat." Vasquez grinned, feral even in exhaustion. "Then let's light the match." Emma adjusted her scope, heart pounding. She could see them so clearly, laughing, eating, loading rifles. These were the men who'd stormed their walls, who'd killed her brothers in arms. And now she had them in her crosshairs. Torres laid out the plan. Emma and Langley would mark targets, provide precision fire from above. Vasquez and his men would plant charges on the vehicles and ammo crates. When the charges blew, chaos would scatter the camp. The team moved like ghosts, descending into position. Emma's scope swept the camp, calling out guards, pointing Vasquez's men through gaps. One by one, explosives were planted. Sweat stung her eyes, but her finger never drifted far from the trigger. When the last charge was set, Torres's voice came over the net, calm as steel. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. The night split open. Explosions tore through the camp, fireballs blooming skyward. Vehicles ignited, ammo crates detonated in violent bursts. Fighters screamed, running in every direction. Gunfire erupted, wild and panicked. Emma fired into the chaos, dropping men who tried to rally. Langley shouted target after target, his voice steady despite the madness. Vasquez's team opened up with full auto, bullets cutting down fighters as they stumbled half-blind through smoke and flame. The canyon was a furnace of sound and fire. But victory never came cheap. From the far side of the camp, heavy machine guns roared to life, mounted on technicals hidden beneath netting. Tracer rounds ripped through the dark, hammering against stone, cutting down two of Vasquez's men before they could dive for cover. "Get those guns down," Torres bellowed. Emma shifted, teeth gritted, lining up the first gunner. Her shot cracked and the man slumped forward, his weapon falling silent. She swung to the second, but the gun swiveled toward Vasquez's team. "Langley, mark it," she barked. Langley's voice was sharp. "Second gun, right side truck, orange tarp." Emma fired, the shot tearing through the gunner's shoulder. He spun away, weapon falling silent. The base of fire was broken, but not before 3 more men fell. The camp was an inferno now, flames licking skyward, bodies sprawled in twisted heaps. Fighters fled into the night, their shouts echoing off the canyon walls. Torres's voice came hard over the net. "We've done enough. Pull back before reinforcements close in." Vasquez's team disengaged, dragging wounded, firing covering bursts. Emma and Langley laid down precision fire, keeping the enemy's heads low as the team climbed the ridge. When Emma finally pulled back from the scope, her arms trembled with fatigue. Her throat was raw, her heart hammering. She slung the rifle, grabbed Langley by the shoulder, and they scrambled up the rocks after the others. By the time they reached the extraction point, the night was lit with smoke and fire behind them. The camp was gone, destroyed, but the cost was etched into every face. 2 soldiers dead. 4 wounded. And Emma couldn't shake the image of Vasquez hauling one of the fallen men over his shoulder, blood soaking his uniform, his jaw clenched against grief. The MRAPs roared back to life, carrying them out of the valley, back toward the battered safety of their own walls. Inside, the silence was heavy. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They had struck a blow, yes, but war didn't give victories. It gave moments. And each one was paid for in blood. Emma sat with her rifle across her knees, eyes on the floor, mind replaying every shot, every decision. She knew they had crippled the enemy tonight. But she also knew this wasn't the end. Somewhere out there, someone would see the smoke rising from that canyon and swear vengeance. And when they came, she would be waiting. The convoy limped back into the outpost long before dawn, headlights cutting through the swirling dust. The gates creaked open and the battered MRAPs rolled inside. Men staggered out, uniforms torn, faces streaked with dirt and blood. The medics rushed to meet them, pulling the wounded onto stretchers, barking orders as they disappeared into the aid station. Emma followed slowly, rifle slung over her shoulder, legs heavy as lead. Her ears still rang from the thunder of explosions. Smoke still clung to her clothes. She wanted nothing more than to sink onto her cot and close her eyes, but the weight of the night kept her upright. She looked at Langley. The kid sat on the ground near the wall, helmet off, his face pale in the floodlights. His hands trembled as he stared at them, like he still couldn't believe they were attached to his body. When he saw her, he forced a weak smile. We did it, right? We actually burned their whole camp." Emma crouched beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, we did." But the words felt hollow. Captain Torres appeared, his sling dark with sweat, his eyes scanning his people like a man taking inventory of his own soul. He gave Emma a nod, but it wasn't the nod of triumph. It was the nod of someone who had accepted how thin the line between survival and disaster had become. "Debrief in 1 hour," Torres said. "Clean up. Eat something if you can. We're not done yet." Emma didn't argue. She knew better. Inside the chow tent, silence hung thick. Soldiers chewed mechanically, not tasting, just moving food because their bodies demanded it. The smell of powdered eggs and instant coffee mixed with the copper tang of blood on their uniforms. Vasquez sat at the far table, his hands wrapped tight around a mug he wasn't drinking from. His eyes were distant, jaw tight. Emma knew the look. He'd lost men. In war, everyone carried ghosts, but Vasquez carried his loudly, burning in his posture, his clenched fists. Emma slid onto the bench across from him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she said quietly, "He died fighting." They all did. Vasquez's eyes flicked up, sharp with anger, but not at her. "Doesn't make it easier." He pushed the mug away, stood abruptly, and walked out. Emma let him go. She understood. Everyone grieved in their own way. Hers would come later, in the dark, when no one could see. The debrief was grim. Torres stood over the map, pointing at the canyon where their raid had lit the night sky. We crippled their logistics. Ammo vehicles, food stockpiles, all gone. That buys us time. But intel says the strike didn't go unnoticed. Local chatter indicates reinforcements are moving down from the mountains. Heavier numbers. Better armed. And they're pissed. The tent buzzed with quiet curses. Emma felt the knot in her stomach tighten. Torres went on. HQ wants us to hold this outpost at all costs. We are the line. If this falls, they'll sweep through half the valley. Emma's mind flashed to the faces of the men carrying ammo crates in that camp, the ones she had shot before they could raise a weapon. Reinforcements meant someone had survived to send word. Which meant they were coming fast. After the briefing, Torres pulled Emma aside. Reynolds, your overwatch saved lives again. I'm not saying this lightly, you're my ace. But I need more than a sniper. I need someone who can see the fight before it hits us. Think ahead. Anticipate. Emma straightened. Yes, sir. Torres's gaze was steady. Can you do that? She hesitated. Not because she doubted her skill, but because she understood what he was asking. He wasn't asking for a shooter. He was asking for someone to carry the weight of decisions that would mean life or death for everyone here. Finally she said, I'll do it. That night she lay on her cot, sleep impossible. The desert was too quiet. She replayed the firefight in her mind, the way the enemy scattered when the explosions hit, the panic in their shouts, the momentary edge of chaos she and her rifle had carved open. But she also saw the faces of her fallen, Vasquez dragging a man whose blood painted the sand. War wasn't just about killing. It was about choices. And choices always left scars. The next day, patrols swept the ridges. Reports came back of fresh tracks, evidence of large groups moving closer. Torres tightened defenses, doubled watch rotations, laid out fallback positions. The outpost became a hive of preparation, the air thick with tension. Emma set up on the northern wall with Langley, scanning the valleys through her scope. For hours nothing. Just dust and heat. Then, near dusk, she caught it, movement far out, too many figures to be a patrol. They weren't attacking yet. They were watching. They're gathering, Emma murmured. Langley swallowed hard. How many? Emma adjusted the scope, counted shadows. Too many. She reported in. Torres's response was curt. We hold. Prep your sector. The waiting was worse than the fighting. Every sound made the soldiers flinch, the rustle of wind, the creak of metal, the distant call of a bird. Then, as the sun bled into the horizon, the first shot cracked. A bullet sparked against the wall near Emma's position. She ducked, returned fire, and the night erupted. Tracers lit the dark. Mortars thumped. RPGs streaked in, slamming into the walls. The ground shook. Shouts filled the radio as fighters swarmed from the east and north, pouring out of the shadows like a flood. Emma settled behind her scope, every movement mechanical. She picked targets fast. An RPG gunner, a machine gun team, a man waving his comrades forward. Each shot bought seconds, but the tide didn't stop. Langley called out targets, his voice steady despite the chaos. Left ridge, 50 meters higher, 3 hostiles. Emma fired, hit one, adjusted, hit another. The third ducked away. Explosions rocked the southern wall. Over the net, someone screamed, breach! Breach south wall. Emma's pulse spiked. If they broke through, it would turn into a slaughterhouse inside the wire. Reynolds. Torres's voice snapped through comms. Get eyes on that breach. Emma grabbed her rifle and scrambled down the ladder, Langley on her heels. They sprinted across the compound, boots pounding, dust rising. The southern wall was chaos. Smoke and fire obscured everything. Enemy fighters poured through a ragged hole, colliding with defenders in a brutal melee. Emma dropped to one knee, sighted through her scope at near point-blank range and fired. Each shot was deliberate, precise. Enemy after enemy fell, but still they surged. Vasquez roared, leading a countercharge with his squad, rifles blazing. The clash was raw, desperate, men fighting at arm's length, rifles swinging like clubs when ammo ran dry. Emma kept firing, her mind narrowing to a tunnel of survival. She saw Torres in the fray, pistol in one hand, shouting orders even as bullets snapped around him. For a moment it looked like they would break. The enemy's numbers were overwhelming, their cries echoing through the smoke. But then Vasquez planted himself in the breach, rifle roaring, his defiance unyielding. Emma covered him, dropping anyone who got close. Minutes stretched into eternity. The smell of blood and fire choked the air. Finally the surge began to falter. The fighters hesitated, their momentum bleeding away under the sheer stubbornness of the defense. Then, as suddenly as it began, they pulled back, melting into the night. Silence. Emma lowered her rifle, chest heaving, sweat dripping into her eyes. Around her, soldiers leaned against the wall, gasping, some sliding to the ground, too exhausted to stand. The ground was littered with bodies. American and enemy both. Torres limped forward, his face grim but resolute. We held. But this was just the first wave. They'll regroup. They'll come again. Emma knew he was right. And she knew something else too. The enemy wasn't fighting blind anymore. They wanted this outpost badly enough to throw everything at it, which meant the next attack would be worse. Later that night, Emma sat alone near the breach, cleaning her rifle by the glow of a dim lamp. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was restless. She thought about Torres's words about being more than a shooter. About being someone who saw the fight before it came. She realized the truth then, heavy and undeniable. If they stayed here, they would be overrun. It wasn't a question of if, but when. Langley approached quietly, sitting beside her. His eyes were hollow, his voice low. Reynolds, do you ever think about what happens if we don't make it back? Emma paused, the rifle piece in her hand catching the light. All the time. But then I think, if I don't do my part, someone else definitely won't make it back. And I can't live with that. Langley nodded slowly, absorbing her words. She didn't say the rest aloud. She couldn't. The thought that haunted her. Even if I do everything right, maybe it still won't be enough. As the night stretched on, the desert wind carried faint echoes, distant shouts, engines, the sounds of an army gathering. The storm hadn't passed. It was only building. And Emma Reynolds, sniper, soldier, reluctant leader, knew her next decision would decide not just her fate, but the fate of everyone in that outpost. The base was burning when the night finally gave way to dawn. Smoke curled black and angry into the sky, blotting out the rising sun. The desert wind carried ash like snow, stinging the eyes of soldiers who had survived the onslaught. The sound of sporadic gunfire echoed in the distance, each burst a reminder that the fight wasn't finished. Among the ruins, Sergeant Emily Carter stood on shaky legs, her rifle hanging at her side, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her ears still rang from the blast that had nearly leveled the command building hours ago. She felt her boots crunch glass and broken plaster as she moved through the wreckage. The world seemed muted, as though wrapped in thick cloth. Her body ached everywhere, bruises on her ribs, cuts along her arms, exhaustion pressing down heavier than body armor ever had. Yet she kept walking, scanning the wreckage, refusing to stop. She had men unaccounted for, and until she found them, until she knew, there was no rest. Carter? A voice called through the haze. Lieutenant Hayes stumbled toward her, his uniform singed, dirt streaked across his face. His left arm hung useless, but in his right hand he still clutched a pistol. His eyes were wild, but they softened when they met hers. You're alive. Barely, Emily rasped, her throat raw from smoke inhalation. What's the situation? Hayes leaned against a crumbled wall, gasping. Command's gone. General McAdams, he didn't make it. Half the officers are dead or missing. We've got maybe 50 men left who can still fight. His voice faltered as if the numbers weighed him down more than his wounds. Emily's chest tightened. The general had been hard, uncompromising, but he had been their anchor in chaos. Now he was gone, and the responsibility felt like it had shifted squarely onto her shoulders. Hayes caught her silence. The men are scattered. Some are digging through rubble for survivors. Others are patching each other up. Morale's hanging by a thread. If we don't rally them soon. He didn't need to finish. Emily already knew. A broken army couldn't survive another wave, and the enemy was still out there regrouping. A soldier sprinted up, blood on his helmet. Sergeant. We found ammo stores intact, but, he hesitated, eyes darting between Hayes and Emily. We've got movement on the ridge. Drones spotted armored trucks, enemy reinforcements maybe 50 clicks out. They'll be here within hours. Emily's gut clenched. The enemy wasn't giving them time to breathe. They'd be crushed before they could even bury their dead. Get everyone together, she ordered sharply, her voice hardening despite the tremor in her limbs. All survivors. I don't care if they're medics, mechanics, or cooks. Put a weapon in their hands. We're not done yet. The soldier nodded and bolted. Hayes blinked at her. You're taking command? Emily met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Someone has to. You're in no shape. The general's gone. That leaves me. For a moment Hayes said nothing. Then, with a faint smile edged with grim respect, he gave a short nod. Then God help us, Carter. She ignored the weight of his words and forced herself forward. By midday, the survivors were assembled in what was left of the courtyard. 53 soldiers, battered, bloodied, many barely standing. Their eyes were hollow, but they turned to Emily as she climbed onto the back of a smoldering Humvee. Dust swirled around her boots as she raised her rifle and spoke. "You all know what's coming," she began, her voice carrying despite the ache in her throat. "They think we're finished. They think we'll lie down and die because command is gone and our base is rubble. But they're wrong." Heads lifted. Shoulders straightened, though many trembled with fatigue. "We are soldiers of the United States Army," Emily continued, fire building in her chest. "We don't quit. We don't run. Every inch of this ground is ours, and if they want it, they'll pay in blood. We fight not just for survival but for every brother and sister we've lost. For the flag they tried to tear down. For the promise we swore to uphold." She paused, letting the silence thrum. "I'm not going to lie to you. This will be the hardest fight we've faced. Some of us may not make it. But if I fall, I'll fall knowing I fought with everything I had left. And I know you'll do the same. So pick up your rifles, load every magazine, and prepare to show the world that we are still here." The men and women before her erupted, not in cheer but in a raw, ragged cry. A sound torn from deep in their chests. It was pain, defiance, fury, and resolve all at once. Emily jumped down, her heart hammering. For a brief moment, hope flickered. The rest of the day was spent preparing. Weapons were distributed, sandbag walls hastily rebuilt, trip mines planted at choke points. Medics worked frantically in makeshift tents, patching wounds with dwindling supplies. Engineers salvaged drones, turning them into improvised scouts and suicide bombs. The base looked like a graveyard, but within its ruins something fierce stirred. As dusk fell, Emily climbed the highest tower still standing. She brought the M24 with her, the rifle that had become her companion through this nightmare. She set up her scope, watching the horizon. Through the fading light, she saw dust plumes rising. Convoys. Enemy trucks crawling toward them like predators circling wounded prey. Hayes appeared beside her, clutching his bandaged arm. "How many?" "Too many," Emily murmured. She adjusted the scope. "But they're spread thin. We can ambush the lead vehicles, force them into the minefield. It'll slow them down. After that, we improvise," Hayes said grimly. She glanced at him. "You should be resting." He gave a weak laugh. "And miss the end? Not a chance." The night came alive with war again. The first enemy trucks rolled into the kill zone, and Emily squeezed the trigger. The M24 cracked and the lead driver slumped over. The truck veered, detonating a buried mine. Flames lit the darkness as soldiers poured from wrecked vehicles, only to be cut down by disciplined bursts from the defenders. The enemy roared back with rockets and mortars, tearing holes in their barricades. The ground shook as armored carriers pushed forward. Emily reloaded, firing until her shoulders screamed. One by one, enemy snipers fell under her scope, but for every one she dropped, more advanced. The courtyard became a storm of fire. Shouts, explosions, the smell of cordite and burning flesh. Emily moved like a machine, leading squads where the line faltered, shouting orders through the chaos. Her body screamed for rest, but her will drove her on. Hours blurred into minutes. She lost track of time, of how many she'd killed, of how many of her own had fallen. All she knew was the fight, the desperate rhythm of survival. Then, as the horizon lightened with the first hint of dawn, the enemy faltered. Smoke and wreckage littered the ground. Their reinforcements had been gutted by traps, drones, and sheer stubborn defense. Survivors fled into the desert, leaving behind twisted metal and broken bodies. The battlefield fell eerily quiet. Only the moans of the wounded remained. Emily stood in the ruins of the gate, her rifle hanging loose, her uniform scorched and torn. Her legs felt like they could give way at any second. She looked around at what remained of her command, barely 24 soldiers still standing, their faces hollow but defiant. They had done it. Against all odds they had held. Hayes limped to her side, his face pale but smiling faintly. You crazy bastard," he said, voice hoarse. "You actually pulled it off." Emily didn't answer. She just stared at the rising sun, red through the haze of smoke, her mind numb. Victory tasted like ash. "Orders, Sergeant?" one of the soldiers asked quietly behind her. Emily blinked. For the first time, she realized the eyes of the survivors were on her, waiting. She wasn't just leading them through a single battle. She was all they had left. Her voice came slow, deliberate. "We regroup. We bury our dead. We prepare for whatever comes next. Because this war isn't over. The soldiers nodded, weary but resolute. As they moved to carry out her orders, Emily let herself sink onto a broken wall. Her hands trembled as she set down the M24. She stared at it, at the weapon that had saved them again and again. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she let her guard slip. Tears welled in her eyes, silent and bitter, tracking through the dust on her face. She didn't cry for herself, but for those who hadn't made it. For the weight she now carried. For the war that stretched endlessly ahead. Above her, the sun rose higher, burning away the night. The battlefield lay silent, but in the distance, faint echoes of engines carried on the wind. The enemy wasn't gone. They were regrouping, plotting, watching. Emily wiped her face, stood and picked up the rifle again. The fight wasn't finished. Not yet. The end.